2 days after we buried my daughter. My son-in-law told me to get out. My name is Thomas Anderson, and I had just lost the most important person in my life. Sarah was everything to me, my only child, my pride and joy. She was just 32 when cancer took her away, and I was still wearing the suit from her funeral when Brad, her husband, decided to show me exactly who he really was. I was in the kitchen, clutching the memorial program like it was a lifeline, when Brad walked in, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. He didn't even look at me when he said it. "Tom, this house is too big for one person. Honestly, I need a fresh start. You understand, right?" My mouth went dry. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice cracking. He shrugged, still tapping on his screen. "There's a place on Maple Street, Sunset Manor, assisted living. I looked it up. Only $1,800 a month." I felt the air leave my chest. My Social Security barely covered my groceries, let alone rent. But Brad's eyes were cold. He'd made up his mind. That was the first time I saw it, the calculation in his gaze. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't broken. He was planning. And in his mind, I was just an obstacle in the way of his new life. The next morning, I caught him in the garage. He was shoving Sarah's photo albums into a dumpster he had rented. 23 years of birthdays, school plays, and vacations gone, just like that. "What are you doing?" I shouted, snatching one half-crushed album from the pile. "Cleaning out junk," he said flatly. "Ashley's moving in next month, and she doesn't want old photos lying around." Ashley, his new girlfriend, the one he'd been texting during Sarah's chemotherapy sessions. I stood there, trembling, staring at the man who had just buried his wife. "You're throwing away our daughter's life," I said. He turned, his lips curling into something that looked like a smirk. "She's not our daughter anymore, Tom. She was your daughter. And you're just a tenant who's overstayed his welcome." That night, I sat alone in Sarah's room, clutching what little I had saved from the dumpster. My hands shook as I flipped through torn pages, staring at Sarah's smiling face, trying to block out Brad's voice echoing in my head. By Wednesday, the situation escalated. Brad had changed the locks on the tool shed where I kept my equipment, 40 years of carefully collected construction tools worth more than his BMW. When I demanded to know why, he smirked again. "Security precaution. Can't be too careful these days." Then he handed me papers, a 30-day notice to vacate, printed on official-looking letterhead, as if bullying me out of my home could be wrapped neatly in bureaucracy. I looked down at the paper, my vision blurring. 30 days? Brad, I don't even have anywhere to go. "That's the legal minimum in Colorado," he said smoothly. "I'm being more than fair." Fair. That word stung. This man, who had never paid a dime toward the roof over his head, had the audacity to call himself fair. He'd eaten meals I cooked, lived in the house I maintained, slept under the roof I paid taxes for, and now he was evicting me like I was some squatter. But what Brad didn't realize, what he never even bothered to consider, was that I wasn't as powerless as he believed. For 25 years I had kept something hidden. A quiet truth, tucked away in old files and sealed envelopes, something that would turn his smug little world upside down. That night, I pulled out Sarah's old closet boxes. Mixed in with her school records and childhood drawings were documents Brad had never seen. And tomorrow, those papers would change everything. I didn't sleep. I sat at Sarah's desk until sunrise, sorting documents into neat stacks, like a man laying out pieces on a chessboard. Birth certificates, tax statements, old business filings with my name on them, well, not my name exactly. Sunset Holdings, LLC. A company I formed in 1998 when I was still building shopping centers and small office parks. A company that quietly bought one very specific house on Maple Grove Drive. At 8:03 a.m., I dialed a number I hadn't used in a while. "Patterson and Associates, this is Margaret." "Maggie, it's Tom." Silence, then a softened voice. "Tom, I'm so sorry about Sarah." "Thank you," I said, swallowing. "I need a formal will reading tomorrow. 2 p.m. I want it done by the book. Notices, witnesses, the works." "You have Sarah's will?" she asked carefully. "I do. and a few things Brad never looked for. Margaret exhaled. All right. Send me your list of who should be in the room. I gave her names. Janet Harrison from First National, my banker for 20 years. Frank Rodriguez, the retired sergeant who lived next door and missed nothing. Mrs. Chen from across the street. The Morrisons. And yes, Brad. Include Ashley, I added. He's moved her in already. Margaret paused. This is going to be eventful. That's the point, I said. At 10, I walked into the kitchen to get coffee. Brad was already there, phone to his ear. He turned the moment he saw me. What is this? He shoved his screen at me. A calendar invite from Margaret Patterson. Subject line, reading of the last will and testament of Sarah Anderson Wilson. You're invited, I said mildly. 2 o'clock tomorrow. He laughed a short, brittle sound. There's nothing to read, Tom. Sarah didn't have a will. We talked about it. You talked, I said, pouring coffee. She prepared. He stepped closer, trying to tower over me. I don't have time for your games. You've got 28 days left. Start packing. Do you ever wonder, I asked, why you've never seen a mortgage statement, or a tax bill, or an insurance invoice? Sarah handled the bills, he snapped. With whose money? I asked. His jaw tensed. This is my house. Bring proof tomorrow, I said, walking past him. Deed, mortgage, anything with your name on it. By noon, word was whispering down the block. Mrs. Chen caught me at the mailbox. Tom, we heard about tomorrow. Do you need anything? Just your honest eyes, I said. That afternoon, I called Janet at First National. I'll need portfolio summaries and tax payment confirmations, I told her. Sunset Holdings? She asked. Yes. Tom, that's quite a paper trail, she said gently. Are you sure you want to show all of it? I'm done hiding in my own house. At dinner, Brad was unusually quiet. He picked at his food, checking his phone every few minutes like it owed him answers. Ashley sat beside him, chin lifted, trying to project confidence and failing. She glanced at me once, then quickly away like a student caught cheating and not ready to face the test. After dishes, I stepped out to the driveway and found Frank leaning against his fence, hands in his jacket pockets. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. He nodded toward the garage. Saw the dumpster haul. He tossed more than photos. There was a velvet box in there. I fished it out. He handed me a small case. Inside lay Sarah's promise ring, the one I'd given her at 16 when she swore she'd chase big dreams and always call home on Sundays. The sight of it took the breath from my lungs. I didn't know he'd thrown this, I whispered. Bullies always throw what they don't value, Frank said. You want me there early tomorrow? Yes, front row. Back inside, Brad was pacing the hallway. I called Sarah's HR, he said, voice tight. They said they can't discuss anything with me, so whatever you think you're doing. I'm not thinking, I said. I'm documenting. Document this, he hissed. You are done here. I met his stare until he blinked first. The next day at 1:30, I put on my charcoal suit, the one I wore in boardrooms, not basements. I fastened my watch and felt its weight like a reminder. I had been underestimated long enough. When we arrived at Margaret's office, the conference room lights glowed against polished wood. Neighbors slid into chairs. Janet set a thick briefcase on the table. Brad and Ashley came last, walking like people who just realized the ground was not solid under their feet. Margaret closed the door, sat, and folded her hands. Thank you for coming, she said. We'll begin with Sarah's will, and then address a few related matters. She opened the first folder. The room fell quiet. And then she started to read. The first lines of Sarah's will were tender, far too tender for Brad's restless shifting. Margaret's voice softened as she read Sarah's words, leaving a small necklace to her best friend, a journal to one of her cousins, and a letter addressed to me. It wasn't money. It wasn't property. It was her heart, written out in trembling sentences about how much she loved me, how she wished she had more time, how she hoped I would never feel alone. My throat burned while Margaret read. Brad's face, though, twisted with irritation, like sentiment was a waste of his time. Is that it? he blurted when Margaret closed the first folder. "No," she said calmly. "Now we must address matters of property ownership." The second folder opened with a rustle of legal paper. Margaret's tone sharpened. According to county records, 1,247 Maple Grove Drive, the house in question, was purchased on the 15th of March, 1998, by Sunset Holdings, LLC. She paused. Let the silence work. The representative for that purchase was Thomas James Anderson. Heads turned toward me. The neighbors leaned forward. Ashley's lips parted in shock. "That's not true," Brad snapped. "Sarah and I bought this house in 2017. I have the papers." "Do you?" Margaret asked coolly. "Because here are the tax records." Every year since 1998, property taxes have been paid directly from Sunset Holdings' account. Here are the receipts. Brad's hand trembled as he flipped through them. "No. It doesn't make sense," Sarah told me. "She told you what you needed to hear," I said quietly. Janet from the bank opened her briefcase. "I can confirm these payments. All of them originated from Mr. Anderson's business accounts. Not one from Sarah Wilson. Not one from Brad Wilson." The color drained from Brad's face. Margaret didn't stop there. "Mr. Wilson, during your residency, did you ever contribute rent to this property?" "No," he muttered. "Did you pay property taxes?" "I thought, Sarah." "Did you purchase homeowners insurance, provide maintenance, cover utilities?" His silence was answer enough. Frank Rodriguez stood then, spreading photos across the table. Images of me years ago handing over giant scissors at a ribbon cutting, receiving plaques, shaking hands with city officials. "This man," Frank said firmly, pointing at me, "wasn't a handyman scraping by. He was a respected developer, a man who built half the projects you drive past every day." Councilman Barnes, who had slipped in quietly and now sat at the far end of the table, nodded. Tom Anderson brought millions in revenue into this city. He was honored repeatedly for community development. Ashley's hand flew to her mouth. "Brad, did you know any of this?" Brad stammered. He hides things. He's lying." "Am I?" I pulled a faded business card from my pocket and slid it toward him. Anderson Development Group. He stared at it as if it were written in another language. "This is insane," he muttered. "I've been living here for 7 years. That has to count for something." "It does," Margaret said, pulling out one final paper. "It means you've been living rent-free at the mercy of the property's rightful owner. And now, Mr. Wilson, you are being served with notice to vacate." She placed the eviction notice in front of him like a judge laying down a sentence. Ashley gasped. The neighbors murmured. Brad's hand hovered over the paper but didn't touch it, like it might burn him. "No," he whispered, "this can't be happening." But it was, and everyone in that room knew it. The room fell into stunned silence. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the faint creak of leather chairs as neighbors leaned forward, waiting for Brad to speak. His lips moved, but no words came. Finally, he slammed his palm on the table. "This is a trick, some legal loophole. You're twisting papers to make it look like I never owned anything." Margaret didn't flinch. "These aren't tricks, Mr. Wilson. These are certified documents recorded with the county. Property deeds, tax receipts, insurance policies, utility payments, all tied back to Mr. Anderson." Brad's face flushed a dangerous red.
"Sarah told me we bought this place together."
"She told you what she thought would keep your pride intact," I said. My voice was steady, but my chest ached at the truth I'd hidden for years. "She came to me in 2017, when the house was about to go into foreclosure. You couldn't qualify for the mortgage. She begged me to step in, to buy the house through my company. She said it would destroy you if people knew." "Lies," Brad barked, but his voice cracked halfway through the word. Margaret calmly opened the third folder. Inside was a sealed envelope with Sarah's handwriting. Before her passing, Sarah left a letter in our files. She asked that it be kept confidential until necessary. I felt the room tighten around me. Margaret broke the seal, unfolded the letter, and began to read aloud. "Dad, I know this arrangement is hard on you, but I can't thank you enough. Brad's pride wouldn't survive if he knew you were carrying us. Please keep this secret. I promise someday I'll find a way to repay you. You've given us a life we never could have had without you. I love you more than words can say." Margaret's voice caught for the first time. She placed the letter on the table, its ink shining under the fluorescent light. Brad stared at it, frozen. His chest rose and fell too fast. She never. His voice trailed off, strangled by disbelief. Ashley, pale as chalk, stood abruptly. "Brad, I can't do this. I can't sit here while you unravel in front of everyone. You told me this was your house. You said you built this life." Her voice cracked. "It was all a lie." "Ashley, wait." Brad reached for her, but she pulled away. "I won't be dragged down with you," she spat, grabbing her purse and rushing out. Through the glass wall, we all watched her stride down the hall without looking back. The neighbors exchanged knowing glances. Mrs. Chen shook her head slowly, whispering, "I always suspected." Councilman Barnes leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Brad, this isn't just about pride. You've been living under false pretenses, taking advantage of a man's generosity, then trying to evict him from his own property. That's not just shameful, it's abusive." Brad dropped into his chair, shoulders sagging. His defiance drained away, leaving nothing but panic. "What happens to me now?" Margaret slid the eviction notice closer. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Consider it generous, more generous than the courtesy you offered Mr. Anderson." His eyes darted around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to defend him. But there was only silence. The man who strutted through life with bravado now looked like a child, caught stealing candy. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already did," I said, my voice quiet but final, and Sarah made sure of it. Brad lowered his face into his hands. For the first time, he looked truly broken. But it wasn't over yet, because Brad still hadn't learned the full truth about everything Sarah had protected from him. That part was still coming. Brad sat frozen, his hands clutching his temples as if squeezing them hard enough might change the reality printed on the documents in front of him. The neighbors whispered in low tones, some shaking their heads, others staring at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Margaret cleared her throat. "There's one final matter." She pulled out a crisp sheet of paper and slid it across the table toward Brad. "This is a 30-day notice to vacate, signed and served by the legal owner of the property. That owner is Mr. Anderson." Brad's eyes darted over the words, but he didn't touch the paper. He looked up at me with desperation. "Tom, please, where am I supposed to go? I don't have the money." I leaned back, studying the man who had tried to erase my daughter's memory from her own home. "That's not really my problem anymore, is it? You said those exact words to me last week. Consider them returned." The weight of his own cruelty came crashing down on him. Janet from the bank stood, adjusting her blazer. "For the record, Mr. Wilson, everything in that house, from the furniture to the appliances, was purchased through Mr. Anderson's accounts. Your contribution has been negligible." Brad's mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked small, a shadow of the arrogant man who once strutted through Sarah's hospital room talking about parking fees while she fought for her life. Frank Rodriguez stepped forward and placed one last photograph on the table. It showed me and Sarah together at a neighborhood event, smiling, her arms around me. "Everyone knew who the real foundation of that house was," Frank said. "It was never you, Brad. It was Tom and Sarah." Silence stretched across the room. Finally, Margaret tapped the gavel she always kept at her side. "This concludes the will reading. Mr. Wilson, you have 30 days. Mr. Anderson, I'll file the restraining order paperwork first thing Monday morning to ensure you're protected." Neighbors rose from their seats, some shaking my hand, others clapping me on the back. Brad didn't move. His head hung low, his shoulders caved in. Even Ashley hadn't returned. He was utterly alone. That evening, as I walked back into my house, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. Sarah's spirit was still here, in every photograph I rescued, In every corner of the home she once filled with laughter. And for the first time, I felt like she was resting, knowing her father had stood up not just for himself but for her memory. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The neighbors rallied around me, Mrs. Chen brought casseroles, Frank mowed my lawn, and the Morrisons invited me over for dinner. After years of keeping my life hidden, it felt good to finally be seen. 3 weeks later, Brad came to collect the last of his belongings. His face was thinner, his eyes hollow. He paused at the doorway, holding a small box. "This was Sarah's," he said, handing it to me. "Inside was her promise ring, the one I'd given her on her 16th birthday. She wanted you to have it back," he whispered. For a moment I saw not the arrogant son-in-law who'd tried to throw me away, but a broken man finally stripped of his illusions. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded, then left without another word. As I stood there, ring in hand, I realized something. Revenge isn't always about shouting or violence. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply the truth laid bare for all to see, undeniable and final. And the truth was this: Brad had tried to erase me, to push me out like unwanted clutter. Instead, he lost everything, because he never understood the difference between kindness and weakness. Sarah's memory remained, my home remained, my dignity remained. And Brad? He walked away with nothing but the lesson he should have learned years ago. Never mistake a quiet man for a powerless one.